is a lot of companies are going to go out of business. If this stays long enough, if it gets deep enough, you won't be able to go find your, corner noodle shop, because they might have gone under in between the start of this crisis and when, life resumes as normal.
The 6 months was just too much for them to bear.
It's just too much for them, especially these smaller size companies. The ability to bounce back is going to be slower than anticipated.
What about all the rescue packages that are coming out now, the amelioration packages that numerous governments are rolling out? Won't that be able to tide the small companies through?
It depends on how fast it trickles through. So I suspect there's going to be a lag between when the government announces something and when it actually arrives in your bank account. And it depends on who it's targeted at or who it's targeted for. So if the packages are aimed, for example, at tourism-facing sectors, you may not be in a tourism-facing sector. If restaurant demand falls as a result of tourists and regular citizens staying home, that has a knock-on implication for me if I supply, forks and spoons and napkins and any other thing that goes into a restaurant business. So the question is whether governments are going to support the spoon provider or only the frontline restaurant, or neither one of them because they weren't seen as sufficiently tourism fronted. I can imagine a lot of firms, especially if this drags on for too long, who will not have the cash flow to make it.
What about blanket things that help everybody? In other words, tax reliefs. That's one thing.
But to get tax relief, you actually have to be in business. It doesn't do you any good to get tax relief, whenever the tax relief check arrives, if your company has gone under in the interim.
Isn't that a slightly odd thing to do now in the present conditions?
Very, which is why we've spent a lot of time trying to argue to governments that you need to be very careful with the way in which you regulate digital trade and e-commerce, because many governments are looking for revenue. What you want is all of your firms, or as many firms as possible, on e-commerce and digital sites so that they can generate more revenue. So even if they're not paying sales tax, again, they could be paying corporate income tax. They're hiring people, they're paying wages, they're paying for electricity, they're paying for water. So if the global trading system collapses, you have over here much better certainty and much lower risk of operating in and around CPTPP countries, because you know what the rules will be.
What about that incredibly big lifeboat, and that is the European Union, although now minus the United Kingdom.
Yes. Who jumped overboard. To keep my analogy going. Yes, they've leapt out of the lifeboat, insisting that their little rowboat is going to be significantly better than the very large ocean liner they were on. I suspect that at the end of the day, when you jump out of a large boat into a tiny one, you may feel very pleased that you don't have to worry about anyone else's rules, but you are now at the mercy of the sea. You are going to face every wave, you are going to face every storm, and it's just you. That is far less safe than being on a much bigger boat, which in this case, the European Union.